Hi, everyone. Welcome. If you are just signing in, feel free to use the chat function to let us know where you are tuning in from. All right. Okay. We've got Carrie tuning in from Massachusetts. Hello, welcome. Some Bastille folks. Woot woot. Hello from Baltimore. Hi, Donna from Kirkland. Seattle, hello. Welcome, welcome, everybody. We're just going to give ourselves a few more minutes for folks to log in, but I just wanted to give everyone a warm welcome. My name is Meghna. I'm a staff member here at Book Larder. It's a cookbook shop in Seattle, and we're so thankful that all of you are joining us tonight. I know that there is a lot of kind of crazy stuff happening in DC today, and I just want to acknowledge that that may be anxiety provoking, and we just hope that you're all continuing to nourish yourselves and you know, be with loved ones, stay safe out there. We were excited to host Carly Knowles, a registered dietitian nutritionist, today. She will be in conversation with food writer and journalist Rebekah Denn. Our event tonight is going to last about 60 minutes. We will have time for Q&A at the end, but if you'd like to ask any questions during the presentation, please do pop them over into the Q&A function down at the bottom. You can use the chat function to talk to each other or send any comments to panelists during the event, and we'll try to get to all of the questions as we can. Today we're here to chat about Carly's newest book, or new book, I guess I should say, The Nutritionist's Kitchen, Transforming Your Diet and Discovering the Healing Powers of Whole Foods. There were 60 plus recipes here, and we actually just got book plates today, so we do have some signed copies if you would like to buy one for yourself or a loved one. The book can be ordered online at our website, booklarder.com, and we also ship nationwide. So if you are tuning in from out of Washington, we'd be happy to send you a book your way. Let's see, what else? That's pretty much it. I think we are going to get started. I'm going to turn it over to Carly and Rebekah. But again, thank you all for joining us tonight. Like I mentioned before, I know there's a lot of crazy stuff happening in the world right now, and we just want to acknowledge any stress or anxiety that may be triggered right now. Thanks again for joining us and supporting our bookstore. And with that, I will turn it over to Carly and Rebekah.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello there. Are we ready to go?
Hi. Yeah, I'm ready.
Fabulous. I am so excited to have the book, and I so appreciate you and everyone else coming out tonight, especially on a day as chaotic as it has been. I realized as I walked into the office that I have no idea what I'm cooking for dinner. So maybe by the end of the hour, then we will we'll have some notion of all that in addition to the other good information. I do want to talk recipes and food, but I wondered if we could start off just with a little bit of philosophy. You talk in the book about how you came to an epiphany in your life that food is medicine, and a lot of what you write about kind of springs from that. So can you tell us what and how?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I studied art. I actually got my fine art degree, my bachelor's in fine art, and was on a mission to make art and be an artist. And I traveled with a Portland, Oregon-based nonprofit to Peru, to northern Peru. And I spent some time with the youth in this incredible community called San Francisco, teaching health and hygiene with two other people. And we started noticing that there were some serious vitamin deficiencies in the community and even in the kids. And it was a truly profound moment for me. Someone who at that point hadn't, I didn't think about food like I do now. It was something I enjoyed and I, ate daily. But I didn't have a further passion in it at the time. And I started to get really concerned and curious. And I wanted to learn more about specifically why the community, many of the adults and children were growing what they call BITO spots, BITOT, BITO spots on their eyes from a vitamin A deficiency. I didn't get it then. I had to do some research, talk to my coworkers, and we figured it out. And it made me realize that food truly is medicine. We can eat to nourish and provide us eyesight, for example, or we can lack certain vitamins and minerals, and that just like blew me away. So so I wanted to study as much as I could about that subject, and specifically how to turn our food into medicine. It's just really powerful if we let it be.
And it's funny, my grandmother used to tell me, if you eat your carrots, it'll make your eyes bright. And I never took it literally.
Yeah. And we're lucky we don't have to often here. Many Americans don't face the same food scarcity, or many of us don't. That's not across the board, but we're very privileged. That hasn't something that's not often on our radar.
And you were saying that you didn't just want to become a dietitian after that. You wanted to become a Bastyr dietitian.
Yeah, I joke I should be like a major spokesperson for Bastyr. It's not funny. It's very serious, actually. I have some naturopathic doctor friends, mentors, and I called them from Peru and I said, oh my gosh, I'm so impassioned by this subject of nutrition, but I am doing some research and I'm learning not all programs graduate studies specifically, are talking about food as medicine. It was various types of programs all over the country, but I really want some help finding a group of people that really believe that we can take the food on our plate and create medicine from it. And I got so many responses from these friends of mine, and they all said Bastyr. So I did my research and realized, okay, this program, although based in clinical medicine, so I get to learn clinical nutrition, I get to hold my own in a clinical setting, we focus more on that food as medicine concept, which was the only program I applied to because it was Bastyr or nothing.
Were you from the Northwest originally?
Yes, I'm from Portland, Oregon. And I've spent a couple different times in my life in Seattle and very much enjoyed it.
And I got kind of a sense of place from the book as I was looking through the recipes. Like I saw the miso glazed cod, and I was like, that's Ray's Boathouse. That's so classic. Yeah. And the Emerald City salad, like your kale salad there. And I felt a little bit like, even if I hadn't known you were from here, I might have guessed.
Oh, I love that, Rebekah. That's such a compliment. I joke, I say it's not the Northwest, we're the North Best. I'm a little biased, but I very much I love the Northwest, and I'm glad you can pick that out. I have fiddlehead ferns, a recipe for fiddlehead ferns in here. I talk about mushrooms. We're really lucky in the Northwest here. We have access to some really incredible food.
I love it too.
Yeah.
Let's see, where to from there. I think it's so interesting that you started out in art and then you kind of went on to science, but you're working with food, which so many people think of as an art. So it seems like one of those rare careers to me where you can kind of mix a bunch of different focuses and specialties.
You can, it's absolutely. So I think it's like anything, right? If you learn the rules, then you can break the rules, right? Isn't that what they say? So I feel like I have this really strong base in clinical nutrition, thanks to Bastyr. And then I've worked in an inpatient setting for years, meaning in hospitals. So I worked in a clinical setting. And then I started to find more, what I was drawn to more in the field. And it wasn't so much that as it was more of the creative side of it, the cooking side, the interacting with people. I love teaching cooking classes. I love teaching in groups, one-on-one outpatients, really fun. But yeah, and then book writing, it really is a field where you can do so much in, and that was really important to me. Yeah, I like to do a lot of things.
So what does a dietitian actually do? When people come to you, what are they asking about? What do they need help with, and how can you help?
Yeah, it totally depends where you are, where you're practicing as a dietitian. So if you're in a hospital, you're consulted to help with tube feeding or TPN, which is IV nutrition. If you're in an outpatient setting, maybe you're counseling, postpartum moms with anemia, or you are helping people with diabetes management. I have worked most recently pre-COVID teaching cooking classes at a local hospital here in Portland. And it's a really incredible program. We basically offered free services to people that qualified, and we would teach a whole variety of types of cooking classes, maybe geared towards diabetics or geared towards new moms, and on and on. And we just had a blast. So truly it's hard to define what a dietitian does. There's so many things we can do.
I really wonder if teaching cooking for a family or for a new parent, like how different that is from just teaching it to an individual. Because I just find personally, there's so much to juggle between different people's preferences and your responsibility as a parent, and what you want to eat yourself, and money and skill, and most of all, time.
Totally. You nailed it on the head. And I think at that stage where people realize all of those balls have to be balanced in the air, plates, whatever, that's when I usually will get, someone will reach out because they're like, okay, this is actually not my area of expertise and I need some support. Yeah. And cooking, let's bring it down to cooking, because that's really what I'm choosing to focus my career in any setting that I work in. It can be hard to throw in kids, a busy schedule, a lot of work, whatever your dynamic is. It's not always straightforward or an easy answer. And let's say you have a food allergy, or one of your children has a food allergy, or, all the things that come up in the nutrition world. It's nice to get support, and I love to be that person and base it around food. It's really an awesome career. I love it. Highly recommend it to anyone that's considering.
I noticed, just speaking of food allergies and sensitivities, that I think a decent number of your recipes are gluten-free. And I didn't know if that was deliberate or if that's just what you prefer.
It just happened like that, to be honest. So something I really tried to do in this book is offer a variety of types of recipes for different people with different diets. So there's meat, there's seafood, there's vegan, vegetarian, gluten-free, dairy-free. I could get more specific if I wanted to, but being it's my first book, and just it's kind of a representation of my philosophy or my foundation. So I tried to keep it as open as possible as well. Maybe in the future you'll see some more specific cookbooks from me, but without even labeling it gluten-free, there's just some great recipes that happen to not contain gluten. But for people that, you know, use that as a defining factor in their choices, it's nice to have it labeled so they can just jump right to it. So I hope to make it easy.
It's a lot of ground to cover in one book. And there were some things I thought were really interesting in there. If you wouldn't mind talking about some of the recipes.
Yeah.
I thought the nut milk in particular might fascinate people, just to think you don't have to buy it and choose a brand. You could maybe do it at home, even if you don't have industrial strength equipment.
Yeah, nut milk is a really, I'm scrolling to my own recipe in my own book right now. Nut milk's one of those, it seems so much more complicated. At least the feedback I get from my patients is it's more complicated than they realize. They think it is. But it's not. It's truly, you add a handful of ingredients to a blender, you blend it, and you strain the solid from the liquid. Simple as that. And you and I had spoken before, Rebekah, about flavoring nut milk of any variety. And it's as easy as adding one more ingredient into that blender. You know, if you want chocolate or cocoa almond milk, you put in cocoa powder. If you want to be wild and fun and create like green or blue milk, you add some spirulina. Kids love that, by the way. You can call it like Ninja Turtle milk or, you know, reptile milk, and they get really excited about it. Yeah, so it's fun to show people that that's really a lot easier than they think, and you just by chance avoid so many unnecessary ingredients then that you find in commercial nut milk, which can cause issues in people.
Are there any things you try to stay away from just in packaged products or stuff that you buy?
How much time do we have? Yes, I'm going to say this with an asterisk. So packaged food is typically more readily available, and it's oftentimes a lot more inexpensive. So I don't want to cross it off everyone's list just by the nature of it being packaged. I don't think that's fair, and I don't think that it needs to come with an explanation. So, you know, instead what I think is, let's look at how many ingredients there are on a label, and you'll be surprised. Sometimes something you thought was simple, like bread, for example, might have 45 ingredients. Like, no joke, you know, there might actually be like a list that's like 4 inches long.
And some of the things in it, like I remember going up to the bread lab in Skagit County and seeing them go through some of the labels and say, yeah, this has vital wheat gluten, a lot of vital wheat gluten, lots of sugar as a preservative.
Yeah.
Stuffed into the bag to help keep it fresher longer. And I was like, gosh, I just thought it was whole wheat bread and it was good.
Right, bread with water and yeast and wheat,
salt, yeah.
Yeah. So, but it is, that's a luxury and such a privilege to find that beautiful whole grain, you know, whole food focused bread. So I don't want to just cross it off everyone's list, but I think some ideas, you know, you can just look for boxed food or processed food that has fewer ingredients, or see if you can make that same dish or that same food on your own. If that, you know, like nut milk, for example, you know, if that feels challenging to you, okay, maybe then you do buy it at the store. But if not, if you're like, wow, that's all that's in it, you know, in my recipe, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ingredients. If you take the strawberries out, 5. If you take out the maple syrup because you don't want it sweet, 4. So if that doesn't seem too challenging, then go that direction. So it needs to be explained a little bit before just saying no or yes, I think.
Nuance is good.
Yeah.
In all things. You give tours of grocery stores sometimes to clients. Can you like take us on a quick imaginary tour and just talk about some of the stops you make and some of the points that you make when you're in a grocery?
Yeah, I would love to. It's one of my favorite things to do as a dietitian. That's another job dietitians do. There's certain dietitians that call themselves grocery store dietitians. it's really fun going on these tours. I would do small groups pre-COVID. I'm hoping to get back there someday. But we'll start in like produce, for example. And if you look at a produce section at most grocery stores, it's one of the larger sections. And you'll often see, you know, organic separated from conventional. And that right there will inspire a lot of questions. You're like, do I have to buy organic? Why is it so much more expensive?
What do you say?
It's really it's nuanced, as you pointed out, but I'll send people to resources like the Clean 15 or the Dirty Dozen. If you've heard of those, they're lists that the Environmental Working Group puts out every year. And I talk about that in my cookbook. It's an awesome resource to help you kind of, you know, sift through which organic foods might be worth it, because in their conventional form, they're laden with pesticides and toxins. Or, you know, a banana, for example, might be okay because they have a casing and you can peel that off where most of the toxins reside. So that's an awesome resource. I'll talk about this one's kind of surprises people. You can look at if any produce is priced by the pound or by the item. So if it's one apple costs, you know, $1 or 50 cents, or if it's a pound of apples costs however much, you can often ask them to cut those foods in half. For like a perfect example would be cabbage. You don't have to buy a whole cabbage. Your produce manager can cut your cabbage in half. You just have to know that, and you have to go ask people about that. It's a great way to save money, not waste food. You know, if you're trying cabbage for the first time in a long time, it's a great way to like jump back into that too.
I don't think I would have known that. I saw a bunch of stories maybe 2 or 3 years ago about how Whole Foods was going to have produce butchers. And I thought, whoa, produce butcher is like, that's marketing, that's good. But I've never seen them. And I didn't realize that you could just ask someone to cut up your cabbage, like to cut up your meat.
Yeah, it's amazing. We don't know that, right? So and it's so fun I love teaching people those little tips and tricks, because it's it's knowledge that could possibly deter someone or encourage someone to try something new. When you have to buy the whole bag of purple potatoes, you know, like you might not, because they're too foreign and you don't need 2 pounds of them. So that's a fun one to talk about. Yogurt, we'll stop at the yogurt case. Most grocery stores have, I don't know, 1,000 different types of yogurt you could possibly buy. And it's, you know, we'll talk about everything from whole fat milk yogurt to skim and what changes nutritionally. We'll talk about
better than the other.
You know, it depends what your nutrition goal is. Whole milk typically is less processed. It often has less sugar in it, because when you take fat out of your milk or fat out of the yogurt, you lose flavor. So you have to put more things into it to keep it tasting good, like sugar. So often a low fat or a skim or non-fat yogurt will have a lot more sugar. Not always, but read the label. That's a great section where, you know, just one time you spend 5 good minutes there, maybe more, and then you never have to look again because you found the 1 or 2 that work for you. But yeah, yogurt's a challenging one.
We were talking the other day about how I felt so betrayed by baby yogurt and toddler yogurt when I realized how much sugar was in them. And then I realized it wasn't just them, that was regular yogurt also, that had always been this sweetened in that stuff with sugar. And it did feel like a betrayal.
It's funny, you know, I wish so badly that our food system wasn't as focused on sales and marketing as it was on nourishment, or I wish it was focused as much on nourishment and nutrition as it was on sales and marketing. But it's a business, just like our grocery stores are businesses. on and on. So you have to just, you know, have a discerning eye, and if you don't have the time or energy, then, you know, finding someone that can help you lead through that, like me or another dietitian, and save you time, then that's a great route too.
Do you feel like the labels on food are sufficient? I mean, if you pay attention to them, will you get the information you need?
Yes, they're changing. They just changed how we label our food. Yes and no. I think it'd just be wonderful. Well, that's a hard one. It's politicized a bit. If you know anything about nutrition labels and food labeling, I think always go to your ingredient list, regardless of the nutrition data, you know, the nutrition breakdown. Look at the ingredients. You know, go back to that rule of, are there a lot of ingredients in this food item? You know, 10 or less might be something to focus on if you can. And then, can you pronounce your ingredients? I mean, I'm sure many people have heard of that. Like, if you can't pronounce it, don't eat it. And often it's true. Like, there's not many cases where you can't pronounce it and it's still something that we all want to eat. So yeah, it's
the Michael Pollan thing, like would your grandmother have recognized it?
exactly. And I say that in my book a little bit too. I have a section called What Would Grandma Do? And it's asking you to ask yourself, you know, like, is this the simplest form? Is this, you know, are you slowing down? Are you being present? Is this the most just simplified version? Because if it is, it's probably been around forever, in which case it's been tried, you know, and true. Yeah.
No, and I didn't mean to cut you off. Were there more things in the grocery store that you'd want to highlight, or?
Oh, we could talk forever, Rebekah. Let's move on. I could talk truly forever, I think.
If we have time, we'll go back to it, because I could listen forever to that. Talking about politicization and nutrients and science, I love your bibliography. People probably can't see it, but it is so long and it supports what you're talking about with science. And I love that. But I'm always a little confounded by nutrition and science, trying to figure out which headline do I trust. You have to drill so far down and say, does this study they're talking about, is this for real? Is this legitimate? Is this a good sample size? Is this junk science? Who paid for this? And I find that, even as an adult professional interested in the topic, I find that difficult. And I wondered if you have any advice for people on how do you know whether to believe the studies you're reading about?
Oh, great question. Let me know when you find the answer, Rebekah. No, it is a lot to sift through that. So, you know, when you look at my bibliography, it's whatever, 6, 7, 8, 9 pages, I think. It's probably smaller than many others you could find. It is smaller than others. So you have to decide, you know, you can't, as a dietitian versus a nutritionist or someone who's just passionate about nutrition, that's really one of the defining differences, is that we are required as dietitians to be research evidence-based practitioners. So my foundation of education is in that. It's been drilled into me in statistics classes and you name it, a list, and many, many classes that are there to support me learning how to take apart research and decide those very questions. Is this valuable? Is this reputable? Who paid for the study? If I could recommend anything, I would say to, you know, the general person, just be curious. You know, don't take one statement at face value. Do a little research. You don't have to dive in to the depths, but things that sound unbelievable often are. Nutrition isn't magic. It's not, there's no, you know, cure-all magic bullet as we were taught in grad school. But food is really powerful too. So if something excites you, or you learn that, there's a food or a nutrient we can eat that helps combat blindness, for example, like that's curious, and get curious and ask. If you don't want to do the research, find someone that you trust. Maybe they're an online resource, but with credentials, find someone you trust that can help you break that science down. And then again, let me know what you find, because it is dense. It's a dense conversation and lots of research. This book took me over a year to write. And I researched constantly, and it's going to be such a shame in like 30 years, not even in 10 years, maybe even in 5, like I'll have to update this edition because the research will have changed.
That's exciting though.
It is exciting. It is. Yeah.
I do want to get to recipes before we have to move on to questions. But since there were just so many little things where I was like, oh, interesting. But one of them was the idea that you can just cook grains like you cook pasta. Just throw them in a pot of boiling water until they're done and drink. Yeah. And I found that revolutionary.
Yes. Let me say something to that, because I just the other day, like 2 days ago, I forgot to put the farro on. I'd made this yummy beef stew, took me hours. And then, I forgot to put the farro on, and I'm about 20 minutes out from dinner when I'd like to have dinner for my family. And I realized, dang, farro takes like an hour plus, like I've ruined it and I didn't have anything else that I wanted to use with it. Anyways, so I reminded myself of the pasta method, where you boil water and you add the grain like you do with pasta. And then you just taste it like pasta. You have a general time frame, 30 minutes for farro is kind of what I set myself up for. And it cooked, I think from start to finish, it was like 40 minutes. And maybe I lucked out, because depending on how old the grain is, it might cook faster or slower. But it often, because you're keeping it up at a boiling temperature, that's what makes the difference. And you cook it so much faster. It is revolutionary.
Taking the stress out of it, that sort of, am I going to burn the bottom of the pot stress?
Totally. I have to check on it. Did I ruin it? Yeah. Yeah.
And then since we were talking about cabbage, and I'm thinking the only thing I actually do with an entire cabbage is make sauerkraut. Can you talk a little about pickling versus fermenting?
Yeah, I can. It's a good distinction to make, mostly because one of them contains probiotics and one of them doesn't. So if you're looking to eat food that has that really great gut supporting bacteria and a long list of other things that probiotics do, you want to focus on the fermented foods, because so back up, pickling is with vinegar, and it's often heat treated or pasteurized to kill bacteria. That's the point of it. So it stays shelf stable for a long time. So those, pickles we get that are in like that yellow, clear liquid on the shelf that will last in your pantry for ages, that's a vinegar base. And then fermented pickles, you often have to find them in the refrigerated section. They have a cloudy brine, and they're full of probiotics because they're not acid based like vinegar, and they weren't heat treated or pasteurized. So the lactic acid, the bacteria and all the goodies in there are allowed to thrive. But you don't have a shelf stable product. It's not going to stay true for years like the other version. So, it's a toss up, but you get all those healthy guys in there.
It is a toss up. Like I want to eat the fermented foods,
Yeah.
but they take up so much room in the fridge that it is kind of a struggle.
It is, I think you just haven't found the right recipe, Rebekah, because if I ferment a jar of anything, it's gone immediately. I almost don't get it in the fridge because it's so tangy and salty and yummy.
So let's talk recipes while we have time. Fermented is good. I also would love to hear more about chocolate almond brownies, because that I think is not what most people expect to see in a book called The Nutritionist's Kitchen, and it makes me happy because I love brownies and I want to eat them.
Yes, please. I agree. That's something I really wanted to celebrate food in this cookbook. This is not a cookbook about things you can't eat. This is a cookbook about all wonderful things about food, and chocolate and brownies are right up there on my list, at least, and yours too. So I have a flourless chocolate almond butter brownie recipe, and it's just delicious. It happens to not contain flour. It has a ton of protein from almond butter. You can use different kinds of nut butter if you need. It's decadent. It's full of healthy fats and protein. And so there's still these like great things to celebrate nutritionally, but you're not feeling deprived.
Fermented foods, favorite recipe from the book?
Well, I really like just the lacto-fermented vegetables that I have in the front section. So the first half of the book's like a nutrition guide with some philosophy. And then the second part of the book is recipes divided by season. And the very first section before that even is recipes for all seasons. And one of those is for lacto-fermented vegetables. And it's just a starting place, a gateway fermentation to try. That's really great. I make tempeh tacos, where I don't actually make the tempeh. You buy tempeh, but it's a great recipe that has that fermented tempeh in it.
You were talking about, like, you recommend yes eating soy, but no eating soy products, correct?
Correct.
Can you talk about the divide there?
Try your hardest to not eat the soy byproducts. We just don't know a lot about them, and some of them that we do know about, they have some interesting side effects. So soy foods have a bad rap. It's one of the questions I get asked most often as a dietitian is, or I'll recommend soy food and people are like, soy, like I'm a woman? No. Or, I'm a man, I don't want to be a woman, kind of a conversation. Truly, that's where it goes. And we debunk a lot of myths with soy. There's a lot of misinformation out there. Soy in its whole form, so unprocessed or very minimally processed, so in tempeh, for example, or a quality soy sauce, you can find some really basic soy products. And there's actually some really great research around supporting. They have healthy fats and fiber and some really great nutrients that are really powerful and really positive. It's very rare that people have issues with soy and breast cancer, for example, or a thyroid issue. If there is a study about that, the ones I found have to do with supplementing soy. So you're taking a soy isolate or a very specific soy product, like a soy-based protein powder or a soy supplement. And that's where there's some funny research, but that's at a level so much higher than you'd get in your food. So a big distinction to make, yeah.
Oh, good. Before we get to audience questions, I think we're almost there. Is there anything I'm not asking about that you want to make sure people know tonight?
Oh gosh. I want to just touch on, dietitians were known for being food police. People walk into, when I had an office pre-COVID or in general, people kind of aren't sure about you, or they ask you what you do at a cocktail party or at a fun party, and you're like, I'm a dietitian. People like hide their plates.
They look at your, what are you eating?
Oh yeah. Or they start like judging you and what you're eating, what you look like. So that's fun. But I want to just say I worked really hard just in my philosophy as a human, as a dietitian myself, but in this book especially, to not discriminate or push away anyone. I tried really hard to keep this as general as you can, but providing information. And with that comes the concept too, that it's not only about what you eat. It's not about the fermented foods only or the what type of yogurt to buy, but also it's about how you eat and how you interact with your food. Literally, like, are you sitting? Are you standing? Are you chewing well? Are you taking deep breaths before and after? Are you checking in with yourself to ask, am I really hungry right now, or am I eating for another reason? Am I really full right now, or not? Those can impact your health and your nutritional status greatly. And so I try to touch on that too, that's just almost as important of an aspect in nutrition and health as is what it is you're eating.
Love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
With this, I'm just going to end with our section with it being this time of year. And we were talking a little bit about how frustrating it was to keep seeing new year, new you. And you said, no, new year, same beautiful you. And I love that. I think those are words to live by.
Yeah.
Let's see, if people want to start putting questions in the chat, then I'm going to look over and start reading some of them out, and feel free to add as you like. Let's see, we have Jessica, who's also in MSRD LDN and does a lot of work in recipe development and cookbook recipe testing. The question is, how do you respond to the false health claims made by bloggers and influencers? Their voices are often so loud and pervasive. I wish our educated voices were more mainstream. Any thoughts?
Oh, Jessica, me too. I think, it's hard. If you go into an answer, what I found, if I go into, I'm so mad at them, I can't believe they'd write this crap, even though inside that's probably what I'm thinking. I could push away my client or my patient or my family member because it's so intense, and I think for me, what I find is just in a way validating it, like, yeah, you read that, that's really interesting, and I've heard that a lot myself. And I wonder, is there as much research behind it as this claim? Or I'd love to look at the research from the last time that I heard about that subject. There wasn't a lot behind it. And it's too bad that someone like that, can't talk a little bit more about how important it is to have research statements. So I try to just be as light-hearted as I can, but it's, like you said, it is so loud and pervasive. It's something we do. I mean, I feel like I'm a myth buster as much as I am a dietitian. And usually it's how I build rapport with my patients, is that's what they come to first. They want to talk about diets that they've heard of and, these nutrition recommendations they've heard from certain people. I spend a lot of time debunking if I can. Yeah.
Mythbusters, not a bad addition to the business card.
Yeah.
Let's see. We have Linda asking, any recommendations for those of us following a plant-based diet?
Yeah. Let's see. I think plant-based is a really cool concept that, we've heard it in so many different titles. Maybe you've heard vegetarian before or plant-based. It's gotten a lot of hype in the last handful of years, and I'm sure that it's been talked about many years before that too. But plant-based doesn't necessarily mean vegetarian or vegetables or plants only. But what I like about it is it's celebrating plants. So plants are at the center of your diet. And then we have any other protein, like animal protein, seafood, meat, etc., is more of like a side dish or a condiment. So that's kind of how I describe that when people are curious about what a plant-based diet is. But as for recommendations, I think it's really individualized. If you and I were working together, I would ask, what are your goals? Do you have any concerns? What life cycle stage are you in? For example, are you breastfeeding, or are you anemic for another reason? Are you on any other kind of medication? So that would inform my recommendations. we're very, as a culture, we're so obsessed with protein. Most people think if they're plant-based, they might lack protein. And so we'll spend a lot of time looking at like what you actually eat in a day. So that's something you could do, Linda. You could look at what you ate in a day and see how much of that, you know, actually has protein and maybe doesn't need to be your focus. Yeah, getting a diverse array, that kind of rainbow diet, or that, you know, rainbow food people talk about, meaning like a diverse array of nutrients, would be really helpful. Yeah.
See, we have Kelly congratulating you on your first cookbook and asking, would you be willing to share what identify our own personal climate means in your book?
Yeah, so something unique, and we haven't talked about in the book yet, is a chart that I created where you can identify your personal climate. And this leads back to your seasonal climate, because the whole book's organized by season. So there are, you know, foods that are in season in the US at least, and specifically on the West Coast at certain times of the year. There's philosophies that I'm really interested in, like Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine, that have thoughts on seasonal foods to nourish good health, or lifestyle choices that we can make that affect us depending on the season. And then I took it farther and I went into, you know, some like emotional information that I've collected just more anecdotally in my life about, you know, how we feel during different seasons. And so I call on readers to ask themselves which season they might be living in, looking at all the aspects of themselves, physiologically, mentally, emotionally, their diet. And it comes back to that idea where health and wellness isn't just food. It's all of these aspects. You know, if your emotional health is imbalanced, it might affect your nutrition. It might affect your physiological health otherwise. So it's just a tool to use if it calls to you, to really look at yourself as a whole person. It's that holistic medicine or nutrition. And so it's just a fun, creative way to help people kind of investigate farther. And if someone has specific questions, you know, Kelly, I'd love to answer them for you. Specifically, if you wanted to email me, you're welcome to at Carly Knowles, or info@carlyknowles.com. But that's basic description.
Thank you. I love that take on seasonality. I've never quite heard it
Yeah.
looked at that way before. But we have more. Nancy asks, what was the most difficult recipe for you to develop?
Oh gosh, Nancy, you must be in the food biz, because there are some recipes that just take forever. Okay, let's scroll to I know exactly which one. It about killed me. My poor husband. So it's where are we? They're spiced cupcakes or muffins with tofu frosting. And you'd be surprised, you'd think the tofu frosting would be the challenging part. Carrot cake cupcakes with vanilla tofu frosting, page 137 if you have a book. I must have made these cupcakes 15 times at least.
Yum.
Yeah, finally they were yum. But I'll tell you, when you use whole wheat flour and tofu, you can make them taste great, but you do a couple things wrong with those ingredients and they can get really bland and heavy, really dense. So my husband and I were eating some like hockey puck muffins for a while there, but we persevered, found the right combination.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the hit for us.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's see. Joanne asks, oh, this is with pickling versus fermentation. What about kosher pickles that have a lot of garlic and salt and no vinegar?
Totally great. So I'm imagining when you say kosher pickles, you're not talking about buying like commercial kosher pickles. You're just saying that by nature they're kosher. You've made sure they're kosher and that they just happen to have a lot of garlic and salt in a water base. So that's my assumption there. If that's wrong, let me know. Salt. So Sander Katz is this prolific author on all things fermented. Highly recommend looking into his work. He gets into the nitty gritty of fermenting all kinds of foods. And he talks a little bit about salt. It helps, or it can be just fine and is needed, and it makes your fermented food taste great. But you can go too far and start to inhibit certain bacterial growth. So, you know, garlic and salt at a basic level, great. And then if you have questions about maybe more than what you might consider a baseline, then I'd refer to his resource.
See, I think I see one more here. Let's see, is there a difference in insulin resistance and diabetes regarding diet and food? This is from Marie. And also asking, I think, are there extremely healthy spices for health and diabetes?
Oh my gosh, diabetes, that's its own book. That's its own like series of books. So yeah, we really could talk about this for a while. Insulin resistance and diabetes and diet. So there's something called medical nutrition therapy. It's kind of the food prescription that dietitians can write or talk about. It's every disease state or a lot of food related issues has an MNT, or a medical nutrition therapy. And there are certain foods to eat and certain foods to monitor for diabetics. And so without getting into the long conversation around that, I would say where I think you'll find the best resources are for those awesome dietitians that have specialized in diabetes, because it's a really complex conversation, or it can be. You know, we could just say, sure, carbohydrates, you know, are need to be monitored, but it's way more complex than that. So in a short answer, yes, there's a lot of food that we can recommend for diabetes and insulin resistance. For spices for health and diabetes, there are. So I talk a little bit about turmeric in my book, garlic. There's some really great research. I mean, spices, some of these spices have been around for thousands of years, like turmeric's like something like 4,000 years we have record of it. But it's interesting because science, you know, really strong research is just kind of developing in the food world. You know, nutritional science isn't that old of a subject in the science world. So we're not quite there with our research, or if we are, it's just more limited. But we're learning a lot about some cool spices, and turmeric's one I'd say look into. It's pretty cool, but there's a long list of other ones too. Yeah, there's some good resources. I don't know if you know Padma Lakshmi. She is one of the top. Right, she's a Top Chef host, and she's wonderful. She wrote a really beautiful book on spices. It's not medically, you know, or scientifically based, but it's very thorough, and I highly recommend checking into that. That's a cool book.
And if we have time for this one last one, I think we could probably just squeak it in. Dee Dee is asking, are there any specific foods that are especially nutritious that most of us should eat, but probably don't?
Ooh, hi Dee Dee. I'm partial to probiotics, not only in supplement form, although I think supplementing probiotics is great. I think probiotic rich food is a really valuable one that we could all use more of. We don't tend to eat those foods naturally in the American diet. So that's a big one. And then in general, I'm going to say fiber, like any foods, if you want specifics, you know, like beans, legumes, grains, whole grains, if you can tolerate them, fruits, vegetables, fiber. We're so obsessed, like I touched on briefly, with protein. And I think really where we could put more of our energy is in fiber. So anything fiber-based and probiotic driven, which is great because fiber often feeds our probiotics in our microbiome. So they really go together.
Have a good list now. Thank you. I think that's probably all we have time for. This is wonderful. And Meg,
Thanks,
are you going to take
Rebekah.
the screen back over?
Thank you so much. This is so
Hey.
fun. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Carly and Rebekah. It was a really great conversation. I feel like I learned so much about nutrition, actually, just by listening to the both of you. So thank you for the thoughtful questions. And also thank you to our attendees. Thank you, everyone who attended tonight. We're so thankful to share a space with you, even if it's virtual. Again, we have many copies of the Nutritionist's Kitchen here at Booklarder. If you'd like to purchase a copy, you can head over to our website, booklarder.com. And we offer in-store pickup as well as nationwide shipping. Looks like that also the talk tonight, tonight's chat will be in our YouTube channel within 48 hours. So if you know someone who might find this talk interesting, or if you know someone who registered and maybe missed tonight's event, you can check out our YouTube channel and we will have this posted after the event. That's all that we have time for tonight, though. I'm just going to drop Carly's email in the chat, if that's okay, Carly.
Yeah, I just did it actually. Email and website. I'm happy to answer questions and send people the resources.
Okay.
Thanks.
It's just info@carlyknowles.com. So if you'd like to get in touch with Carly after the event, please feel free to do that. But thanks again. That's all for tonight. We'll see you all hopefully in person sometime when it's safe to gather again. Have a good night and stay safe out there, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Rebekah.
Thank
Thanks,
you. This is
Becca.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Have a good night.